Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if the Reconquista continued. The Reconquista is a very fascinating topic. Not only did it define the national identity of Portugal and Spain, but it was a major event in which European and Christian powers were united, coordinating attacks against the Islamic parts of Iberia, also known as Al-Andalus. Al-Andalus is very often portrayed as the champion of tolerance, but this is far from the truth. Spain and Portugal were also not the Christian fanatics that they are very often made out to be. Christianity was mostly used as a political tool or reason to drive the Muslims away from Iberia. In every part of Iberia, be it the Christian parts or the Muslim parts, we had periods of tolerance and periods of persecution. And I would be glad if most of the media would not try to give an almost romantic image of Al-Andalus. While I must admit that the architecture and culture is indeed very interesting, it wasn't a paradise for Christians. There were periods where Christians, they were just killed for being Christians, and let's not forget that every non-Muslim had to pay higher taxes, even in times of tolerance. So, for taxes, there was just no tolerance. At some point, Iberia was very split, and you had different Christian and different Muslim rulers with different policies. As a result, we should try to not lump everything together but have a more nuanced approach. Religion sometimes they get mixed up with politics for very various reasons. And in the case of Iberia, one specific reason for the Reconquista was that the Christian principalities in the north, they saw themselves as the successor to the Visigothic kingdom, and they wanted to reconquer Iberia from the Moors or Muslims. There were attempts by Portugal and Spain to set foot on northern Africa, but unfortunately for them, both countries failed. Yes, Spain has Ceuta, Melilla, but these are very tiny parts of northern Africa. So, what if all of that changed? What if the Reconquista continued? The best point of divergence for this alternate history could have been an independent Aragon and a Portugal uniting with Castile. But a better point of divergence that might actually work equally well, if not better, would be that the Habsburg never get the Spanish throne. The Trastamara dynasty may continue their rule in Spain. Many things would become different. Sure, the Habsburg they would still be a very powerful dynasty within Central Europe. But Spain in this timeline they would focus their policy on their colonies and on Northern Africa. Much of the silver, wealth and profits would be invested in conquering parts of Northern Africa and keeping them. The Pope would of course support that. Spain would sometimes be involved in European affairs, see Austria as a neutral ally against France and have some ambitions in Italy as well, but to a lesser degree than in OTL. The Habsburg they won't be poor, no, because they still had the wealth of the Netherlands. And they had the silver mine of Tyrol, and the Habsburg they were a successful dynasty, so not getting the Spanish throne doesn't mean that the Habsburg dynasty will suddenly just lose all their power, no. And also because of the fact that the Habsburg don't have the throne in Spain means that the wealth of the colonies they would be invested in conquering and keeping parts of Morocco and Algeria, but this would have a lot of implications. First of all, the population will not just submit to the Spanish or the Portuguese. In fact, you will see many fierce battles, and the rulers of Iberia would waste a lot of money in getting ports, getting cities and regions from Morocco and later on even Algeria. Portugal and Spain would have better relations between each other because they would both fight on the same sides. This doesn't mean that they will suddenly become best buddies, but it just means that some conflicts, they may actually never become a possible threat between each other, or some conflicts, they would be solved very fast because they wanted to focus their energy on Northern Africa. France would also have less trouble leading a Mediterranean policy and gain more influence over Italy. Italy in general would become very unrecognizable in this timeline. Genoa and Venice, as well as the Papal States, at first would have most of the power, but Genoa would then probably fall to the French. The Papal State may get a huge French influence at some point, and Venice would continue to just hang on in there and probably also fall under the influence of the very strong Habsburg monarchy. Southern Italy could go its own way, perhaps be close to Spain, or face Ottoman invasions in that timeline, even some successful ones. An Iberian presence in Northern Africa will anyway draw the attention of the Ottomans, and this means that the Ottomans will have more wars with European powers. The Portuguese already had a bunch of wars with the Ottomans. Now, with Spain on their side and perhaps some other allies such as Venice for instance, the Ottomans would have a hard time not only on the sea but also on land. France would be less paranoid about being encircled, and France could take some more risks politically speaking. When Spain would be busy with their colonies or with Northern Africa, well, France, they may more often try to attack the lowlands or invade parts of the Holy Roman Empire, enforcing their own type of policies. But the French would never be able to break any of their neighbors' back, and we would have a back and forward situation. And the Dutch, they would anyway still be able to rebel, wanting independence, and I don't think that they could just be easily suppressed. And the Germans, despite their lack of unity within the Holy Roman Empire, they would unite against the French, but only for that particular reason. The French, they would be more successful in keeping some parts of Italy, and they may attack Spain a few times, but France will also have to spend more money than in OTL because of this permanent back and forward situation, and this at some point would still break the French. What might happen is a very unknown factor. Maybe they will get something akin to the French Revolution, there will be reforms, or something else might happen. Spain, with a different dynasty on the other hand, would have different policies implemented in their colonies, and we could see a massive wave of Moros or Muslims going to the colonies, where they would over time adapt and maybe also convert them to Christianity, of course. Many Northern Africans who would have lost a lot in their homes, they would then just have to try their luck in the colonies because there was just no other way for them. And just like also some former Muslims from Granada did in OTL, yes, many of the first Spanish settlers, they came from the southern Spain, or they were former Muslims. Certain parts of the colonies would get a Spanish majority over time. And this may be on the surface a Spanish majority, but if we would dig in deeper, we would have Muslims or probably Moroccans or Berber people who actually went in there but who became Hispanicized. There would also be an Islamic influence in the colonies, but it would be a very subtle and a very discreet influence. Northern Africa would not be all of a sudden part of Spain and Portugal, no. Northern Africa would be conquered step by step. The northern tip of Northern Africa would be very Christianized, almost unrecognizable from other parts of Iberia. But the further south you go, the more Muslims you may find, the more the Islamic influence will be in there. The Iberians would certainly not go very deep into the south, saying like the Saharan desert, because there was just nothing for them to take. And many Muslims and persecuted people, they would have no other options besides the colonies to flee, And we could see probably some militarized nomadic desert warriors in there. Many Muslims and persecuted people would flee there, and we could see a more militarized nomadic desert warrior culture arise in those parts, something similar to the Cossacks in nowadays Ukraine. They too would have their own Reconquista as goal, but of course it would be something very else. It would be about reconquering the parts of Morocco and Algeria. Training wars would happen in there, but the urban population would get more numerous over time. Spanish and Portuguese would be more spread. The elite, urban elite, would accept conversion because of the benefits, and the Saharan warrior culture could not persist for a long time because of the decreasing numbers. Spain and Portugal would still get in a lot of trouble because Northern Africa would never just be profitable to both countries. The maintenance of a huge army would also cost a lot. Countless lives would be lost, and at the end, even with the colonies, the wealth would be wasted in Northern Africa. Spain and Portugal would be overshadowed by England, the Netherlands, and perhaps even France if they get their act together. But with that said, the population of Northern Africa in an alternate 2021 would be very Christian, speak Spanish or Portuguese, and we would have little linguistic islands of people who speak a Berber language, Amazigh, or an Arabic language that would be very similar to Maltese. And it's even possible that certain parts in there would become the most devout Catholics of the world. Moreover, Morocco would be considered part of Europe, the European culture, which would expand until Western Sahara. This also means that the bad relations between the Christian world and the Muslim world would be worse in OTL, and I don't think that there could be some type of appeasement between the two religions. Christianity and Islam would be so different, they would have so many conflicts, and it would be very difficult for both religions to coexist in some way or another. And let's also not forget the fact that there would be still tribes, nomadic tribes. Maybe some would be Christian, some would be Muslim, and they would cross to each other's land. So perhaps, for instance, in an ATL of Libya, some Christian nomads, they would go in there because that's how they traditionally always did it, and well, Libya would still be very much Muslim, and they would get into conflict. And the same could be said for Muslims coming from Libya who would then go to a Christian Algeria. Well, it would also cause some problem. Conflicts between Islam and Christianity, they would happen very, very often, and they would dominate the problems of that area. Christianity may also become very strong in Western Africa, but not totally dominate that region. Overall, we can conclude that if the Reconquista continued, it would have altered Europe. Northern Africa would be more Christian. The relations between Islam and Christianity would be worse, to a point where both could not reconcile with each other, and the former colonies of Spain and Portugal would have a more discreet Islamic influence and a more quote-unquote white population than in OTL. Spain and Portugal would still bankrupt themselves, and England and the Netherlands would surely be the winner of such a timeline. And that's where we leave it for now.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.